Kia ora, kia ora, kia ora tātou, nau mai, haere mai, and good morning everybody to our council meeting for Friday the 31st of July 2026. And I'll now ask the Deputy Mayor to open the karakia.
Tēnā koe, Your Worship, o te rā tēnā tātou, nau mai hoki pai mai. Welcome back everyone. Tū tawa mai I runga, tū tawa mai I raro, tū tawa mai I roto, tū tawa mai I waho. Kia tau ai te mauri tū, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, tāi ki e. Tēnā.
Kia ora, thank you. Is that on? Can you hear me okay? Yeah, okay, good. Welcome back everybody, and hope the batteries are recharged and ready for a busy final 6 months of the year. We've got our order of business, and before we get started, look, just acknowledging that this meeting is being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. In terms of health and safety, if we can get that screen up please, thank you. In the unlikely event of an emergency, on hearing the alarm, we leave the building via the nearest fire exits, the green running person signs, and we will evacuate to the assembly area in the clock tower in the square there tomorrow hine. In terms of health, it is a non-smoking and vaping facility, and a defibrillator, again, unlikely event of needing that, is located outside the entrance to the customer service on the ground floor. Any incidents, please report those to our committee administration here. All right, if we could, in terms of officers responding to any reports or questions from elected members, could you please just in the first instance state your name and position, just to make that easier for those online. We have online councillors Dennison and Councillor Meehan. We have also, going through to number 2, our apologies. We have an apology for late arrival from Councillor Rachel Bowen. So I'll look to move those. I've received nothing else, so I'll look to move those. Seconded by the Deputy Mayor. No comments. Sorry, Councillor Harpiter.
Can I put apology in for Councillor Wood?
Yes, you can. Yep. I haven't received anything, so I didn't know what he was doing. So, okay, I'll look to move that. Seconded by the Deputy Mayor. No other comments. We will vote. Oh, sorry, Councillor Finlay. Sorry. Sorry, Councillor. If you read the screen, it says apologies from Councillor Rachel Bowen for late arrival. Yep. Okay, we're through the apologies. We will vote. As passed, 14 votes for, none against. Thank you. Okay, moving through to number 3, notification additional items. Have received none. There's nothing from the floor. Declarations of interest, again, there's nothing from you. No. Public comment, again, nobody has asked for public comment. There's nothing from the chamber. Right, we move through to number 6, which is confirmation of minutes for our meeting of the 24th of June, and I'll look to take part 1 and 2 together, if that's okay, as confirmed as a true and correct record. And I'll look to, can I move those? No, I can't, I wasn't here. So could I look to have somebody move those, the Deputy Mayor, and somebody, thank you, Councillor Harpiter, that was here, and any matters arising. Councillor Sabellin.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I just had a correction on page 12 for the recommendations for Shareholders Committee, which says that you presented them, but you weren't there. It was me that presented them. So we can note that.
Sorry, before we just, there's something wrong with the microphones. I'm struggling to hear. Can we turn the volume up, please? While that's happening, Councillor, sorry, can you just repeat that again?
Yes, there's a correction for page 12 because I was the one who presented the recommendations from Shareholders Committee, which is noted differently there.
Okay, that's noted. It is. Okay, I think that's a little bit better. All right, are there any other matters arising? There being none, we will look to vote on confirmation of the minutes, part 1 and 2, please. And that's passed 11 votes for and 3 abstentions. All right, we'll move through to number 7 and our main item of business, which is around the 2027 long-term plan, the city's strategy, strategic plans and infrastructure strategy. I'll ask officers Peter Ridge and Stephanie Velvin to come up, please. Page 21 of your papers, councillors.
Morena koutou. Does that sound okay?
Just.
Stephanie Velvin, Acting Manager, Organisational Planning and Performance, joined by Peter, Manager, Strategy and Policy. We are very pleased this morning to present this report for the 2027 to 2037 long-term plan, which includes the draft city strategy, 9 draft strategic plans and the drafted significant issues for the infrastructure strategy. These have been developed in collaboration with a wide range of staff across the organisation off the back of the feedback and direction we've received from you over the last few months through workshops and various other engagement methods. I'll hand to Peter to make some opening comments about the city strategy and then I'll talk a little bit about the strategic plans.
Kia ora koutou, Peter Ridge, Manager, Strategy and Policy. So within the report we cover off a number of matters included in your strategic direction. The first part to talk about is our draft Oranga Papioia city strategy. So this has been developed through the feedback we've received from you in our workshops. The structure of the draft strategy is very similar to our current strategy. But we've updated it to reflect that direction we've received from you. Principally, the new vision statement, the goal areas, and the outcomes. The other significant element in our revised draft city strategy are the indicator framework. So this is, again, something we had circulated prior in May, when we received some endorsement for that draft framework. We've been able to develop that a little further. But as you'll note in the report, there are some indicators still marked in yellow, highlighted to indicate that there's some further work to be done on that. We have Stacey Andrews here with us as well today to answer any questions specifically about the indicator framework. We've also had feedback from Rangatane on our draft city strategy and the strategic plans. That feedback's come a little late into the process in terms of this report, so we haven't been able to include that in the draft that you've got in front of you today. We are still working through understanding that feedback, and we intend to circulate that to you fairly soon, and we will be looking to incorporate the feedback they've given us as far as possible in the next version of the strategy, which we intend to bring to you in September. So there'll be an opportunity for you to see how that feedback has shaped the revised version of the strategy. The other thing that we've done with the city strategy is tried to simplify it a little from the current form. So we've pushed some of the information that was currently contained about our plans in the strategy into the plans themselves. So the statements about the current and future state. As Steph will tell you in a moment, our strategic plans have had a restructure to reflect some changes from DIA, which is now part of NSERT. And as a result, those strategic plans are a little more detailed, so that's enabled the city strategy to be a bit more focused on the strategic focus of those vision and goals. And I think that's all I can share with you at this point, and hand back to Steph.
So as Peter mentioned, the most significant change really to the strategic plans is to the structure. So we've gone from 14 plans to 9 draft plans, and that really is around trying to align as best we can with the proposed new groups of activities from what was DAA, now MSERT. And that is to help, the intent of that is to help with communicating that with yourselves and with the community when we have to report on that, because they're going to be mandatory reporting measures against those groups of activities, and obviously we have to report our financials in that structure as well. So trying to get more alignment in that sense. Also in terms of the content, as Peter mentioned, it's a little bit more detailed than the current plans. We took the feedback around trying to see that line of sight in terms of the measurement, so we have included the performance measures against all of the activities within the plans in those drafts. Other than that, it's really been quite a light touch in terms of the detail for the activities and the actions. Most of the levels of service remain similar to as they are now, and any changes are those highlighted in that table in the cover report for your consideration today, or in subsequent workshops as we've outlined. We've got a range of our subject matter experts with us in the chamber today who are available for input, and other than that, we are happy to take questions.
All right, thank you. So could I just ask a couple to kick things off before I go to colleagues? Essentially today it's around receiving, endorsing what's in front of us. We'll look at Rangitane's commentary, which is coming a little bit late, but look at that at the next meeting. Just looking at the plans, you've gone from 14 to 9. So can you give me an understanding of which ones you've given the real tweaks or the condensing to? You've obviously pulled some together. Just briefly.
Yes, so in terms of the first part there, yes, very much presented for your consideration and feedback. We're not expecting sort of full endorsement or approval of the documents that are in front of you today. Yeah, looking to further develop them and bring them back. In terms of the plan structure, there are some that have remained pretty similar in terms of the grouping. So thinking about waste and resource recovery, that area is pretty similar to how it's shaped currently. Probably the other one is roading and transport, and maybe the economic development space, but aside from that, it is quite different. So there has been lots of regrouping. I would say in particular in terms of community facilities, yeah, that's sort of quite different to how it's displayed currently. At the activity level, there haven't been too many activities that we've had to split, which has been good. But in terms of where they sit with each other, yeah, as you can see, there's quite a lot of change.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Steph and Peter. I guess my first question is, we're carrying on with this as if the whole amalgamation agenda isn't happening or is happening in another room or another time and place. But, you know, looking forward 10 years at this point, it seems to me that these plans that we're making, they don't include any contingency for any amalgamation plans. They don't include any contingency for taking over services that the regional council provide. So how are we meant to engage with this on the one hand when we've got all this other stuff happening on the other hand?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Councillor. Through the Chair, yeah, it has been something that we've had lots of conversations about. Even I believe at the Mural Forum, conversation came up with the Regional Council and whether or not they should proceed. They were thinking whether or not they should proceed with a long-term plan. Our view is that we should continue as we currently have until something is legislated or put in place around it, and even for the Regional Council to develop a long-term plan, because it's really important, no matter what might happen in terms of the shape of local government in the future, those 3 years in particular of any future long-term plan will highlight programs and projects and those sorts of things that are actually really important to the communities, as well as on a regional basis. So our plan is to continue with what it is that we have in front of us, because the things that you'll discuss now will be important to Palmerston North City, and they will need to make sure that if there are any future amalgamations or those sorts of things, that those things are then really taken care of in any future development of any future plans as well.
So we're going to continue with this without taking that other piece into consideration. Is that what you're saying?
The short answer is yes, but having our mind tuned to those other things that are happening in the local government environment.
And I assume we don't have the option to defer this kind of planning work until we know where we're at with the reorganisation of local government?
Yes, through the Chair, no.
Okay, right, well that's cleared that up. And then the other question I've got is, I remember when we were doing the workshop in the Missoula room, that you had kind of the groups of activities, and then there were some kind of orphan activities that didn't quite fit in your other groups. How have you, do you remember that conversation? How have we dealt with those things? Have you managed to slot them in somewhere? Are they missed out? What's the story?
So, if I'm remembering correctly, you might be referring to the other grouping?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that in the guidance we've received from MCERT still exists as an other grouping. We didn't want to create a very large plan with a whole bunch of sort of disjointed things, or be a plan called other. So some of those things are quite important to council. And so we made two subgroups. So that's the Community Development Plan and the Economic Development Plan that you'll see attached.
Okay, so the how you've dealt with them is to make two, in inverted commas, new plans. I mean, they've got new names, but their actions aren't that dissimilar. So they're the Community Development Plan and the Economic Development Plan. Is that right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's my questions.
Councillor Zabellum.
Thank you. Just picking up on that with the standardisation prompt / directive that's come from DIA. It's my understanding we've been quite proactive in getting we got an early steer that that's what we would be required, and so that's what we've proactively tried to sort of organise. Do we have any idea whether other councils are doing that, and whether that might ease a potential amalgamation if you've got standardisation of plan categories across LTPs?
Yes, we actually have a regional hui where we talk to our colleagues who are also developing LTPs, and most are, I guess, leaning into this direction. There are some concerns, I guess, that the proposed groups of activities haven't captured all of the functions, particularly in the regional council space.
So I guess they're grappling with it a little bit more than we are, but largely, while we will have to rearrange our financial structure in the background, has captured all of our activities and will work quite well, we think.
Okay, thank you. I had a question about the feedback from Rangitane, and I wondered if, I don't know, could we get a gist of where that was aimed at? Particularly, we've got on page 3 a description of our partnership with Rangitane and whether they had any comments about how that was articulated.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the feedback from Rangitane was largely supportive, but it did identify some areas that it would like to explore and have further conversations around. Unsurprisingly, it did acknowledge the partnership agreement and the current state of that. It also identified some outcomes that it would like to potentially see some changes to around those. It's kind of tricky at this point to get into details because we're still working through what those look like and how we might suggest some modifications, which is why we think the best approach is to circulate that to elected members and look to make some recommended changes for the draft that comes back in September.
Okay. Thank you. That's helpful. I was thinking about, in reading that description of the partnership, there are reference to decisions or appointments that we've made that are no longer in operation, and I thought if this is a forward-looking document, how appropriate it is to include that information, or whether it's misleading to have that information in there when those things are no longer in operation. I wondered what was the rationale for referencing those things.
So when we looked at that section of the strategy, we did draw heavily from the current strategy. We did make some changes, but we haven't gone through it extensively, and we kind of recognise that the position of the partnership agreement is dynamic state. So when we come back in September, excuse me, we can look to update that and reflect that through any other feedback we receive.
Okay, thank you. I had another question which was related to the indicators, which we've had shared some thoughts on, but just looking at the point that's been made about the distinction between performance measures and indicators, and I was pondering that and wondering to which extent indicators are necessary. Couldn't the progress on performance measures be doing the same job that the indicators are doing, or what is it that indicators are adding to the process that performance measures aren't picking up?
Yeah, it's a very interesting kind of conversation to have around the indicators and performance measures, and if I've missed anything out, maybe Stacey can leap to my defence. The way we've understood it in terms of this strategic document and what we've tried to capture in the diagram in the report there is the difference between the indicator framework for outcomes, which are primarily at that city level, as distinct from performance measures, which are more around our organisation's performance, delivering the actions that are going to achieve those outcomes. So there's a meeting of the minds between the two, and that's that bit of the middle of the diagram that we need to make sure lines up really well. So they are different things for different purposes, and what we're trying to do is ensure that we don't conflate the two by trying to create performance measures for things that we aren't directly controlling. We directly control the actions of council, and those actions contribute to outcomes, but the indicators point to broader trends related to things that are not exclusively within our control. So what we've tried to do with this in terms of the strategy is identify the indicators for those outcomes, and if those indicators aren't quite right, then we're happy to take some feedback and do further work. But also it may be that the outcomes are perhaps not worded in the right way to capture what it is you're trying to achieve, and if they were worded differently, then we may come up with a different indicator to capture that more accurately. Then at that lower level, in terms of performance measures, in terms of the actions, again, there's a strong relationship between the things that we do and how we would measure that. So if the things we do change, then the measures might change as well. So I think the emphasis we've got here is making sure that we've got the outcomes right, and then setting the indicators appropriately for the outcomes, and making sure that the actions and the plans are right, so that we can identify the correct performance measures there.
So, thank you. So we might see indicators at more of like a dashboard monitoring context, as opposed to using it to show progress.
Correct. So the indicators that we have currently are reported through our city dashboard on our website, and the intention is that the indicators for outcomes in the strategy would form the basis for that revised dashboard.
Is there any value or way that the performance measures as an indication of overall performance can be reflected as part of the indicators? Or is it much broader, it's sitting much higher than that?
I could give an answer to that question, but I think Stacey's probably going to do a far better job than I can do.
I'm really struggling to hear at the moment. I don't know what we can do about the sound.
Could we just take a couple of minutes break, please, and we'll sort out the tech. We may get some feedback. Something's not right with the tech, and it has been altered over the break, and we'll just... is that on now? Is that better? Okay, Peter, can you just bring your microphone forward and just...
Yes. Is that louder? No?
Yes, that is better from me.
Better?
Okay,
Try and talk louder.
we'll continue. Thank you.
Kia ora tātou, Stacey Andrews, The Economist, and thank you for your question. It's a very good one. What we're trying to do is not conflate the performance or the outcomes for the city with council's actions. So the reason why we're trying to not separate completely but delineate between the two is that the citywide indicators provide a backdrop in which the council is making decisions in. So we are one of the contributors to those outcomes, but we're one of a myriad of forces that are driving those. So it's more in terms of separating the background or the environment that we're operating in, and then we come down to the performance indicators which show how council is contributing to those outcomes. So we're trying very much not to conflate the two, which can cause confusion. Also, personally, I think it's really important to have an understanding of the background or the backdrop environment that council is making decisions within, and monitoring the citywide indicators at that level will provide that. Alongside the dashboards, we're also proposing to bring back a report annually that provides that context on the wider environment that we are operating as council and making decisions in.
Excellent, thank you. Just frantically scribbling notes, but I think I've got that. Heritage management actions for consideration and accessibility actions. Is that the place to give feedback on those specific actions that were listed today, or are you looking for more of a general steer on those ones?
We would be open to direction on those things, and whether you want to, I guess, vote on those. That would give us really clear direction and enable us or our staff in those areas to develop budgets accordingly. So yeah, the timing of this conversation really is to inform the development of our programs and budgets, which are underway currently through to I guess the end of August is really when the staff are working on those. So having a clear direction on some of those things that we're putting forward for consideration is really helpful today.
Okay, thank you. In the tables that you've given us, which have the listed of proposed actions, are they done in any order of priority, or they're just...
I've grouped the level of service review topics at the top of the table, and the rest are in order that they appeared in the plans to me.
Great. Thank you. That's all from me. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Kia ora. Just firstly, the third recommendation in our papers asking us to endorse the significant issues. I see those outlined in attachment 15. I'm just wondering what staff's understanding of the current requirements around rates capping.
Through the chair. Yep, we're aware of the potential requirements around rates capping. Nothing's been legislated as yet. We perhaps hear through the grapevine that something might be potentially put in place through the systems improvement bill on the third reading. What we've probably previously explained through the chamber as well.
Thank you. So I think I've heard through the chamber the direction that we should be working towards that. Is that still the case?
We're always trying to produce a program that meets the level of service and the programs, asset management plans and those things that we have in front of us. And I think that we've worked reasonably closely with elected members on looking at how it is that we get rates down to an appropriate level. Again, your decision at the end of the day what that might look like in that rate cap environment.
Okay, so in terms of the potential for that requirement being, put into legislation and the indications that that's the direction that's being headed it towards, should that be included in the list of significant issues? Well, I'm just trying to understand what
Just
has
trying to
been
remember
included.
the list on the, I haven't got it quite in front of me. The team might talk about that, but I think government reform is listed as a significant issue in there.
What's listed as a significant issue?
Government reform.
Yes, I see that, but there was just no specific reference to any sort of rates capping. Through the chair, if you're wishing us to add something else additional into that space, happy to consider that and take that on board. And in light of that potential requirement, in what way has that requirement been incorporated into officers' thinking when drafting this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor, are you referring to the infrastructure strategy issues specifically, or the city strategy more
I'm
generally?
referring to all of what's in here, which appears to be a lot of business as usual plus some extra things. So I'm just wondering if we are entering, or if we are heading towards a rates capped environment, how much of that has been in officers' mind when they're putting options together for this?
Through Mr. Mayor, I think as the Chief Executive has indicated, it very much is in the front of our minds as we've gone through this process. Ultimately, where the application of the rates cap and any other reforms, where that comes to where the rubber meets the road, as it were, will be through the budgets and through the programs. So we set forward the strategic direction as directed by you to achieve the outcomes that you've identified you want to achieve. The plan set out the actions as our recommended best way to achieve those outcomes, and then the budgets that sit behind those will be the means by which we can deliver those actions. If that effectively achieves a position within the rates cap, then that would be the ideal situation. If it doesn't, then that's where the key decisions come down to how you fit within the envelope, and that's where the feedback loop back through the plans and the strategic direction may need to require some adjustment.
Okay, thank you. Just moving to page 22 and bullet point 2.2, which talks about the elected members' feedback on levels of service. I'm just wondering how many elected members responded to that? 10. Okay. And so, and where would we find, is there I couldn't see a summary of that feedback anywhere. Is that available to us?
I can make that available.
Yeah,
I didn't include it as an attachment,
Yeah,
but I did summarise it in the table, I
Yeah.
guess, at a high level.
So where it talks about an equal amount of feedback for something and an equal amount against, so that would be 5 for and 5 against if there was only 10.
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And just moving to page 20, sorry, page 30. This is really, sorry, it's actually page 32. There's an example given around waste management and waste where it talks about that council on the 11th of March have asked for costings and impact assessment on specific resource recovery options. And then it says on page 32, in line with this, actions have been included in the draft strategic plan against those activities, and draft programs and budgets will be further developed for consideration later in the year. I'm really, my question, I'm picking on that, but my question is really a process one, where if elected members have asked for costings and impact, my view is that's not a direction to progress a particular activity, but officers have obviously interpreted that in a way that they're saying that those things will be included. And I'm just wondering what the fundamental assumption is as we engage with the long-term plan about actions which haven't had a direction from a specific direction from elected members to be included. Obviously my preference would be that they're not included unless that direction is given. Can we get an officer comment about what the assumption is around activities that have not yet been given specific direction from elected members to be included? Because that does concern me a little bit if the assumption's already that that's being put in before that direction's been given.
Yeah, so there were a small number of things where they've been sort of referred to the LTP through various resolutions over the last year or so. We didn't want to miss any of those, and so yeah, it really was an attempt to capture all of the things that have been raised and provided through all the feedback we've received so far. The choice about whether you want some more information and you want that taken out of the draft at this stage, or whether you're happy for it to be left in and considered as part of the draft programs is really for you to determine today, and similar for a number of the other things in that table.
So I'm not sure how many other activities have a similar situation to this, but for me personally, I don't have enough information yet to make a well-informed decision about whether I would want it included or not. But I am concerned if it's just simply included without that direction. So if we wanted fundamentally to give direction around a process issue that things aren't included unless that, or if things are set aside as being referred to the long-term plan but yet to have a decision, is there any way those activities can be separated out rather than the assumption that they're just put in?
That would be for you to provide that direction, I guess.
I'll
if you
just
wanted us
I'll
to
just
take
get
that approach.
General Manager Strategy to give a response to that as well. David.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. I think this sort of highlights one of the answers to the earlier questions about the iterative nature of the LTP process. So the resolution reference there says to include costings, to include specific options in the next LTP. So that means we would be consulting on the costs to do this piece of work. Following that consultation, if there wasn't a desire to do some or all of that, then the plan would need to change as a result of the consultation. So it's as the team was saying earlier, but as Peter said with the budgets, it's an iterative process. But at this stage, we've been directed to prepare budgets for the purposes of consultation. In that respect, the plan mirrors that.
Sorry, that didn't quite give me clarity. the direction was to progress costings and impact assessment, yeah. So, but.
And to refer, that there's a resolution on the table to refer items to the long-term plan with costings, and I think that's what the officer was trying to explain. Have I got that right?
Yes.
And so, but more my point or my question is, where is the assumption that those should all be included prior to that consultation?
Well, it says to enable community consultation on specific resource recovery options in the next LTP. So if we're to consult on options, we need programs, we need budgets. To do that, we take direction from the plan. However, following that consultation, if the council doesn't want to proceed with all or any of those programs or budgets, then the plan prior to it being adopted would reflect that.
Have we got the option through the consultation process to identify activities but not include them in the plan, but to seek feedback from the community as to whether or not to include them in the plan? Is that a way that we can do that?
I mean, we can have a look at the wording in the plan to make it clear that it's something that's going to be, maybe consulted on rather than proposed. But it's, as I said, it's an iterative process, and ultimately, if the council decides not to do any of that, then the plan would be amended accordingly prior to it being adopted.
Yeah, or councillor, you can just say, look, I wish to not do that, and put it up, democracy, put it up to the vote.
Yeah, I realise that, but when the assumption is that it's in...
It's not an assumption, it's a resolution that we're going to consult on those projects with the costs.
No, the resolution was to make costings and impact statement available.
And refer them to the LTP. Anyway, we're dancing around the subject. If you don't want them in, then there's a simple process of doing that.
My concern is that if the assumption is that they're in, then it can stay in without a majority. If it's out, then if it needs to be put in, it requires a majority.
We'll put that to the vote as well then, councillor. Yeah. We've had that debate, I don't know, 10 years on the run. So you're very entitled to be able to put that to the vote.
Okay.
But we're dancing around at the moment. You've got a list of other people wanting to speak. So please, if you've got any other questions, if you haven't, I'll move
just
to
a couple more questions, if that's okay. Just through this chart, starting on page 26, there is a number of activities that outline some options. So, for example, the Safe City Hosts, there's an option of whether just to embed it into the programs or whether to keep it considered as part of the strategic priority grants. I mean, there's quite a few options there. In what way do you want feedback on which option that we would prefer? And do you want us to vote on each one of those, or is this... I'm just a bit unclear about the processes today, where there are options in the paper about when we give that feedback. Is it today, or is it more general feedback that we're giving today?
The process that we had talked about was where you are feeling able to make a decision based on the information that's provided. You could put up a motion and vote on that today, and that would give us that really clear direction to inform the budget and program preparation. As outlined in that table, if you feel you would like further information, then we can take that direction and provide that information in the best way.
Okay, thank you. That's all for me.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to Steph and to Peter for the work done in presenting this. Do have a few questions, starting off on page 42. On that page, we introduced the Enabling Good Lives principles before we do anything in terms of articulating strategy plans, etc. I was just wondering how we selected Enabling Good Lives as a context setter, but not other things like age-friendly, welcoming city, etc., to also put up front.
The Enabling Good Lives principles have been included in our strategic direction for a number of years. When we were looking through the drafting of this version of the strategy, we wanted to acknowledge that and include a bit more information to explain what that was. Its placement isn't, I wouldn't say it's particularly deliberate. I mean, it could feature anywhere within the strategy document. I felt that was an appropriate place, but if you felt that it could be moved to an appendix or another place in the document, then that's absolutely fine. Yeah.
So will the final version of this in some months' time include more explicitly what it means to be a welcoming community, what it means to be an age-friendly community, etc.?
This is your strategy, and if those are the things that you would like us to include there, then absolutely we can include those.
Great, but just for clarity at this point, the only thing that we've really spelled out at this level of detail within the city strategy document is enabling good lives principles.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. Next question is around some of the specifics in the city strategy. Page 76 lists out a number of environment goals and indicators. Indicator number 8 refers to having a stormwater strategy that's been developed with CDW. My recollection of pre-July is that we had already put a stormwater strategy out for consultation, that there's hearings coming up soon for those. So I'm trying to understand, are we talking about another strategy that's a joint strategy, or are we talking about the same strategy?
The same strategy.
Cool, thank you. So then based on that, the measure of success is that the strategy exists. And I'm wondering if that's, going far enough in terms of the next 3 years of articulating presumably the reason we have a strategy is so that we have action, and whether acknowledging simply the existence of a strategy is, in officer's view, the appropriate indicator there.
Yeah, it's tricky. Outcome indicators, because we are obviously in a state of development with the stormwater strategy, but also with the various pieces of strategy around Central District's water. So I think we probably could have highlighted that one yellow as well, and we could take that further, I guess, pending where the stormwater strategy lands.
Thanks. Did I hear earlier that there might be another bite at this cherry in December or something like that?
September.
Yes, September. One thing just to add to that, as you were talking through this particular outcome, little light went off in my head from reading some of the feedback from Rangatane, and they also identified this outcome as being, I think they described it as somewhat simplistic, and they were looking for perhaps a bit more in that outcome around implementation of the strategy. So that may be one of the elements that we bring back in the draft in September, where we can perhaps flesh that out.
Great, thank you. Just a couple more here. Page 80 is I believe that's the plan that deals with climate change now. There's some reference in there to the perverse incentives of the ETS, and that can be a factor to consider. I just wanted to confirm, regardless of that statement, that the overall broad intent of the long-term plan, the city strategy, and the supporting plans is to see that as a city we are able to reduce emissions over time.
Might refer that question to Adam, if that's...
David.
Or David's going to comment later.
Good morning, elected members. Mr Mayor, Adam Jarvis, Climate Change and Sustainability Manager. The short answer is yes. The slightly longer answer is, given the dynamics in central government and with the ETS, part of our role here is really to enable the community to, in some senses, reduce its ETS liabilities as much as reducing its emissions directly. So there's a somewhat of a how to put it, somewhat of a ambiguous role there for us over the years, and I guess the part of what we're happy to, as officers, happy to hear is a more directive guidance about specifics of what exactly you're looking to achieve in that citywide space.
Great, thank you. Moving on to page 161, which is part of the transport plan. There's two actions in there that are listed under the ongoing section around committing council to considering how to progress the fielding to Palmerston North, or Palmerston North fielding perhaps, cycle or shared path, and likewise the city to Ashurst. I just wanted to understand the implications of leaving our commitment at consideration in terms of if opportunities come up during that period of consideration, how would those be responded to? How would parking it up as consideration influence our ability to attract NZTA co-investment, etc.?
Glenn O'Connor, excuse me, Glenn O'Connor, Acting Infrastructure Manager. Thank you, Councillor. We'd probably take some guidance from Council on the amount of investment for especially the fielding to Palmerston North shared pathway, and accordingly the amount of investment would influence the amount of monitoring and reporting that we would do on that. Currently in the long-term plan that we're in now, there is no funding for the fielding to Palmy pathway. For example, Council may be of a mind to increase that funding.
Great, thank you for that response. Two brief final questions, Mr. Mayor. The first is around the accessibility charter, page 175. You map out a number of activities that could be undertaken in terms of easy reads and other things that we could direct budget on. My question is, have we contemplated devolving budget under a set amount to the disability reference group so that they could actually direct what happens with the accessibility charter response?
Good morning, Olivia Wicks, Comms Manager. Unfortunately, the actual accessibility charter is very strict on the requirements we must do. If you wanted to go down that that path, we could do that. That would probably come under that policy option that we put there as an alternative to that. But yeah, the charter is very clear on what must be done and all of the different things that must be done. Yeah.
And so of the many different things that must be done, what certainty do we have that the priority that's in that table is consistent with the priority that the community holds?
Yeah, and that's been one of the hard things is over the past year having to go through all the stuff we've done and try and cost that up to get this to you today. So we haven't had the chance to fine tune that. We do know that that is in line with the information that is most sought generally from council. So we've tried to do that, but that is one of our next steps would be to go back to the reference group as soon as we can, just check that it aligns with their thinking.
Would that be available by the September meeting?
I would have to check to find out when the next meeting is, but we could try.
Great, thank you. And finally, the draft infrastructure significant issues at the very end of our documents today. I guess I found it to be a little bit light touch, and I'm just wondering, have we, in forming up the draft infrastructure significant issues, considered accessibility, emissions, safety? Those are three words that I saw nowhere in there, and just wondering, are we really getting our heads around the broader significant issues facing infrastructure?
We might hand that one over to Helen Churton.
Helen Churton, Manager of Asset Management Planning. So what you see before you in terms of the significant infrastructure issues is the guidance that stems from the guidance that you guys provided to us in the workshop in February, I'm recalling correctly. And I guess when we were looking at that, we were looking at some the very, very significant things that were going to be reflected in quite significant spend. But we are willing to take further guidance from you today in terms of anything else you wish to see included that are maybe not reflected in the write-up of those issues as they stand.
Thanks. I guess I'm just trying to work out how this plan will ultimately read to a member of the community that may, for instance, have an interest around accessibility or disability issues. Is there a way that we can just better communicate that that is something that's already in the mix?
We could reflect it, I think, potentially in the strategy itself in terms of how we approach our infrastructure as a whole, in terms of how we plan for our infrastructure as a whole.
Great. Thank you. That's appreciated. That's it for questions, Mr. Mayor. I will have a couple hopefully minor recommendations on wording to bring through.
Councillor Kuru.
The first question is around the city marketing. I just didn't see Palmerston North really represented in there with the, there's no mention of families or sports or anything like that. I was just wondering if that will be growing at all, or is that an aspiration, what's currently in the city marketing?
Which page are you referring to, Councillor?
I was talking about international students. Sorry. Oh, 111.
Sorry?
111.
111, page 111.
111.
Is it in terms of the description and what will this mean? Is that
Yes, yes.
okay? I might bring up a colleague, Jess, to answer that question.
Morning, Jessica Papel, Marketing Manager. It's normally kept quite high level, but it is definitely captured that we do communicate obviously with our secondary school sporting tournaments, trying to obviously make the city sound even better when they arrive. Was there something in particular that you wanted added into the description, or?
Probably just more focus on the things that we're doing well already, the sporting events and the family events that we have. Just a lot of the positive stuff I've seen has been around those things. I just seen there's heaps of tourism and business promotion, but
yeah, so a lot of that direction obviously sits within the individual campaign. So we might do a campaign fully targeted to families when they arrive, and vice versa locally to say, hey, in the school holidays, what about doing these things? So this kind of just sets the high level indication as to where we go. But yeah, that definitely sits at a campaign level, so can definitely ensure that happens.
Thank you. The next one is page 125 with the community reference group, with the groups. In terms of measurement, could we possibly listen to the advice of the community reference group, act upon the advice and then report back that we've acted on it, rather than it be measured on something that we'd received rather than the action that we'd received it. So instead of it just being received, that we actually acted upon it and then report back that we've acted on the information. Does that make sense?
So the performance measurements are designed to capture the activities of the organisation, and in the case of the community reference groups, the action or the activity of the organisation is to support the reference groups to exist and meet and to do that successfully. Whether their advice or advocacy to you is taken on board is really, I guess, sits with this table rather than something that staff can control. So I think that would be a tricky measure to include, but we can definitely consider other ways to describe the success of that area if that's what you would prefer.
Is there any information, or do we get is there any sort of table that tells us about the information that we've received from the reference groups, and then what has actually been acted on and what has just been left not listened to? Is there?
At the moment in the non-financial reporting, there is a section which describes the activities in that space. Aside from that, each reference group has an annual report, and we encourage them to include in their annual report their activities and their advice and advocacy through the year. At the moment, there's no, I guess, collective place for that information in like a table or a transactional format.
Okay, thank you. The next one is around the parks and reserves, page 138. Are we equity mapping parks, playgrounds, shades, toilets, lighting, safety and walkable access across the neighbourhoods? And which neighbourhoods have the poorest access to quality parks, play spaces and shade? So are playground and reserve upgrades being prioritised by need, deprivation, population growth and child density?
There definitely has been some work underway in terms of the play equity, and I understand that's coming in a report to Council in September, I believe, in September, and perhaps Kathy Todd might want to expand on the other areas that you've mentioned there.
Kathy Todd, Manager, Parks and Reserves. So as we've discussed at this table many times in the past, we manage our parks and reserves as a network, but then we're trying to manage that as equity across the city as well. What that means is not every park is going to have the same features. So within our asset management planning, we have a hierarchy. And each suburb has a reserve that is a certain standard, and our focus in the last few years has been on equity around those. Shortly we'll be reporting back on shade, particularly as part of our health promotion policy, and we are shaders and the work we've done in shade. We've recently reported back on the accessibility elements through the general program, and you'll see in the asset management plan, you'll see where the levels of service gaps remaining are. So there's a number of ways in which we do that, but it isn't something that we can say at every particular reserve. We summarise that every 3 years in our asset management plan, but it is quite complex in terms of when you consider equity and deprivation are two different things but related things.
Okay, and then the other question is around the fruit trees that are going into the reserve areas, which I think is fantastic. Are they, is it possible to get some sort of a fruit tree bank so that you could, in the lower deprivation or in the higher deprivation areas, they could actually request fruit trees instead of normal trees planted or natives?
So we have had a couple of things come forward to the council. One is food forests. The other thing that's come forward is community orchards. What we've got here is a program of fruit tree planting, and so we're planting fruit trees, a small number in a number of reserves. A couple of years ago we started the concept of community orchards, and they were unsuccessful. The main reason we've got such a variation in soil types across the city, we had quite a great loss of trees. So we've tried to go to our simpler trees that grow quite well, like feijoas, lemons, that type of thing. Ate Mate has got fruit trees in it. We've got some pears and apples around the place. We could certainly map those out, but we were reluctant to do so at this stage because then some of them are not yet fruiting, so they're relatively young, so we would send people to a location and actually there wouldn't be any fruit there. But it's certainly a future proposal for us to map that on our website once we've got them established and fruiting, or promote it through social media. Hey, the Feijoas are fruiting at the moment, this is where you can find them.
Are they in certain areas, the fruit trees that you've got out, or are they just scattered?
Scattered. So again, looking at equity, the trees we've been planting have been suitable for the location, but in locations all across the city.
Okay. Next one. This is in terms of the economic development plan. I'm just wondering how we will measure decent jobs, living wages, youth employment, Māori and Pacifica employment, and pathways for people facing barriers to work.
Sorry, Councillor, could you just give us a page reference for that, please?
Number 72. Oh, sorry, that might be different. It's, sorry, economy, the new business. What is currently our baseline, and how many businesses currently have made it to 3 years? That's my question at 72.
That sounds like a question for Stacey Andrews. I think it would be best to answer that one.
And to the officers, I mean, that is something that's quite a lot of detail. That might be something that could be shared to everybody a little bit later.
Kia ora, would you mind repeating the question, please?
Sorry, what is our baseline, and how many businesses currently have made it to 3 years?
I don't have that information on me, but can provide it to you as on the dashboards as well. So we do have the overall business survival rate located on the dashboards. I think we're about 59.5%, somewhere around there. In terms of the baseline, that's something that we are yet to establish. So there are multiple ways that we can do it. We can look at an average over a certain amount of time, because we do have economic cycles, and of course that impacts on these figures. Or we can use a point in time as the baseline. So we haven't undertaken that work yet. That will come back to you in September.
Okay, thank you. The next one. Governance, in terms of governance, how will consultation reach people without easy internet access, transport time, confidence or familiarity with council processes, and any sort of barriers, like language barriers, access barriers, low barrier engagement?
Good morning again. I guess we've kind of become dab hands with our LTP engagements over the time. So typically, and we haven't fleshed it out just yet as to what we're going to do for this LTP, but last time, you know, we sent things to houses. We went out actually and spoke to community groups. I think we spoke to about 50 community groups during the consultation period. We went to all sorts of events, and we had like a big expo at the Conference and Function Centre. Yeah, I wouldn't be too worried about us not being out there. We were very visible. Yeah.
Thank you. Where are we? Okay, there's many indicators that measure citywide averages which can hide inequality between neighbourhoods and population groups. Can any of the indicators be reported by neighbourhood, deprivation level, age, disability, ethnicity, etc., tenure and household type where possible?
Apologies again. Sorry, would you mind restating the question?
Most of the indicators measure it citywide, so they've got like a blanket average. Is there any way that we could have indicators that report by neighbourhood, deprivation level, age?
Yes, we do have those indicators currently, the deprivation index, which we can look at certain areas or SA2 level areas across council, which are more or less suburb level. One issue that we do have going forward is with the census no longer being undertaken, whether or not we will be able to track that information over time and progress over time, which is quite a bit of concern for the data community across the country currently. But yes, currently we can provide that information.
Okay, thank you. And the last lot, the last one is regulatory. Have we done any sort of assessment of how enforcement settings affect low-income households, especially fines, compliance costs, and access to advice?
No, is the answer that I'm getting from Kerry Lee.
Do we have a payment plan offered for low-income households?
I'll just refer that question to Kerry Lee.
Kerry Lee, General Manager, Development and Regulatory. Councillor, can you tell me, is that question related specifically to regulatory or to the organisation overall?
Regulatory.
In terms of the system we use currently, it is, we have trialled payment plans, but the system does not support that.
And the last one, why is the suggestion to review and adjust thresholds for infringible and prosecutable offences? Why is it the suggestion when it is a bigger cost to the ratepayer?
Councillor, could you repeat that, please?
The review for adjustment to thresholds for infringible and prosecutable offences, so the new review suggestions. How come is it something that we have to do? Is that enforced by the new legislation, or?
Can you give me the reference page, please?
Oh, sorry, it's in the last table, and it's got beside it. It's got the review suggestions.
Is that specific to animal management?
Yeah. It's on page 171.
Kia ora koutou. Caleb Johnson, I'm the Environmental Protection Services Manager through the chair. Can you repeat the question?
Why is the suggestion if it is going to cost the ratepayer?
The figures provided in the table break down the difference between what would be at the cost of the ratepayer versus the dog owner registration fees. It's in line with the current funding policy for that service. When it comes to infringements, that would really not come at any cost. The figures provided here are with consideration to increasing potentially prosecution of dog control offenses. Currently, those are quite costly to take through court proceedings, and so it causes some deliberation on what situations drive us to actually pursue prosecution.
So that's an increase of cost due to the
prosecution, yeah, legal fees
review
associated with lawyer costs and related prosecution court costs.
Do you think that has a positive outcome or effect in terms of cost, in terms of when you weigh it up against the outcome? So the cost to the outcome, is it?
We currently do that through the chair. Currently we do that. We do weigh the public good consideration against the benefit of prosecution or the benefit for the victim. In some instances, to retrieve costs for the victim of a dog attack, prosecution is helpful in achieving that, but the way the Dog Control Act is currently structured, a number of the offenses are a maximum penalty of $3,000, which is typically not upheld. So we'll see how that shifts with the incoming reforms for the Dog Control Act and if some of those offenses are adjusted in the penalty. But right now, that limited penalty amount weighs into our consideration of the public good of what we pursue for prosecution.
Thank you. And then, sorry, I've got another couple of questions. With the high density housing, you might be able to help me. I don't know. Is the high density housing, is that going to solve our housing problem in terms of affordable housing? Is that?
I think this is another person.
That's regulatory too.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and David Murphy, General Manager, Strategic Planning. Certainly the district plan change, which is about to be, I think a decision will be coming shortly around plan change I, medium density, so that's expected to increase supply. I think whether there's a direct correlation between increasing supply and housing affordability, we'll have to wait and see as to how the market responds, but certainly the council is looking to pull a number of levers regarding land supply in the future, which we hope will have a positive correlation in terms of affordability.
Thank you. And the last one, in terms of the roading, have we prioritised the safety, when we're doing a safety list, have we done that, and is that going to go into the long-term plan?
Glenn O'Connor, Acting GM Infrastructure. Certainly Councillor will be bringing safety information back during the long-term plan for Council to consider and prioritise accordingly.
Thank you. That's me.
Councillor Apata.
Thank you. Just looking at page 178, and thank you very much for all your work. Is that list of significant issues, is that in order of priority?
We might just ask Helen Churton to come and respond to that question.
I'll just get the CE to answer.
Through the Chair, the short answer to that is no. There's no priority order in there.
Okay. Second question then is about number 3, which is supporting a growing city. And Mr. Murphy answered a little bit when he talked about it, but when you go back to page 72, it says enough land and infrastructure to enable housing development and business growth. And then one of the issues, which is number 3 on page, I'm sorry, we're flicking, 178, which is supporting a growing city. How do these, they contradict each other. So I'm just trying to work out how they work, because they both say the opposite things. One's in the issues, one's a big issue, and then you've got one as a goal that you want to have. And I know jigging the district plan is going to do one thing, but we've also still got, is it a big goal for us to have more land and here, but then you've got it as a big issue as number 3.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, David Murphy, General Manager, Strategic Planning. Yeah, look, it's a common challenge for all growing cities. We can increase supply through planning controls, but ultimately we also need to, be delivering infrastructure in a timely fashion to support that. So we know the challenges associated with that. Infrastructure is costly. It can be time-consuming to provide. So I think that tension that you've identified is actually a good tension, because it shows that we're doing our best to increase supply, but there are pressures on providing infrastructure in an affordable, timely way. So there are potentially changes coming around the funding and financing of infrastructure. We're looking at means and ways of working with the development community in different ways. We had a meeting just last week with some of the key developers. We talked about making sure that first 3 years of the LTP, the most critical pieces of infrastructure they need to enable growth are within that first 3 years. So as an example, but it is an issue.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank
you. All right. That's questions done. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Steph, and appreciate the work of you and others in the background. So, colleagues, we'll probably have, I'm sure there'll be some extra recommendations. I know Councillor Barrett signalled a couple of small ones, but I'm going to put the main ones up. We will break at some stage. It depends how many people want to speak. So, recommendations to Council that we receive the City Strategy for consideration preparation for the 2027-37 long-term plan. That Council receive the draft strategic plans for consideration and preparation for that LTP, and that Council endorse the draft infrastructure strategy significant issues for consideration in the preparation of the 2027-37 long-term plan. I'm happy to move that, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Look, colleagues, we're essentially receiving and endorsing this today. As we know, those who have been around the table, there is a bit of a journey, and this will be a more interesting journey than normal, with a lot of other things coming into the mix with government legislation. We have to consider what partners think, and Rangitane will get their information or their commentary, and we'll have a discussion about that at our next meeting with this. It is a light touch, and I totally get the questions and comments around the changing nature and environment of local government and what's pending. Let's just list a few. Waters is leaving us, we've got RMA, we've got simplifying local government, the Head Start, the amalgamation conversation, we've got the rates, bans or caps, and there's others. So the question has been asked. I can tell you I asked it along with a whole lot of other mayors to MCERT ministry officials and to the minister face to face, and said, can we defer, or please can we just do a 1 year annual plan? It seems ridiculous that we're doing all of this work, and we absolutely certainly know there's going to be some change. The answer was a firm no. So I just want to put it out there. That's what's been asked. So I'm with you on all of that, and so are our officers. But legally, we just have to keep on track with our current LTP plan. But we know in the back of our mind that there will be changes. So I do think that needs to be taken into consideration. The question on partnership with Rangitane, and I think the city has a proud history. From a Rangitane perspective, I've heard it said to me many times that their relationship with us is an exemplar. They're very proud of it. I don't think we're misleading anybody. It's just in a state of renewal. So I think it would be worse not to put it up to say that we do have a partnership with them. So I think, yes, there is some working through to be done. But look, the Kawanata sits there. It needs to be updated. But we're still going to work together. Just because the Kawanata is not updated, we're still going to work together with our partners. I believe the city overall is going quite well, and the indicators signal that over a number of different sectors. And I think Stacey's comments about we are just one partner in how the city operates, but we're a pretty big city influencer. But if you look at our economy, our numbers show that it's still quite strong. The social cohesion is strong too. The city is relatively vibrant. I've been around, just like all of you have been travelling a bit in the recent month. I'm amazed when I've come back to the city just how vibrant and how much activity is going on. Yes, there is some struggles out there with retail, hospitality, but by and large, we are fronting those challenges pretty well. And despite the lack of funding in the environmental sector, we continue to do good work in protection and enhancing our local environment. Look, all the potential legislation, possible new partners, all needs to be factored in. So again, that's why I say keep that in your mind. This is an endorsement, so there will be some changes. Look, there was questions around the rate capping, the rates ban. My view, we're already operating in that environment, and I think in that envelope. And I do think it's top of mind. We know there's very little wriggle room, if you want to call it that, and prioritisation is key at the moment. Can I just address the thing around data, because there's a lot of questions around how we measure things. Data is key, and I think Stacey did talk to that as well. And losing that is a bit of a concern. We get missed, I think, continually at the big table down in Wellington, and it worries me a little bit, whether it's fire services, whether it's education, whether it's transport, whether it's health. We do seem to come out on the wrong side of the referee's call, if you want to call it that. We don't get the investment I believe we deserve. So not having that true data is a real concern. And that's why this council and local government New Zealand, and for those that don't believe in local government New Zealand, they canvass the select committee strongly about keeping the government to keep some form of census data in budgets, coming budgets. Some in the government were not into the traditional survey that, what censuses have been. And look, there's an agreement that hasn't worked well in the recent past. But other countries do it in different ways. They still collect continual data. And if you look at Scandinavian countries, UK, Australia, they all still do a census, but it's not the traditional one weekend survey. It's continually done. And we've got to try and influence our MPs, our ministers, to continue that. If we lose that data, it's a very slippery slope because people will pick winners and losers. And look, that could be very, very dangerous. And for the city, it could be. So please, colleagues, just ask you to support the recommendations. It is a journey on the LTP. I think it just keeps us, we'll get another more detailed look in September. I appreciate there'll probably be some smaller things you want to perhaps put a little bit more attention to, but I think we've made a good start, and there'll be more information coming through. We'll know where Head Start and all those sort of things will sit in the coming weeks. We'll know perhaps in the next 2 or 3 months where some of this other legislation sits. So ask you to support it, and it just continues. It gives officers a little bit of a steer to keep going. Otherwise, we will slow the machine down. All right, Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for outlining your thinking quite clearly around the much bigger picture and the fact that we're in you might say, a hyperfluid state in terms of the long-term plan relative to other long-term plan cycles with so many different factors. So I won't go right back through all that, but just to say, I think you've summed that up very well. Did just want to indicate to colleagues that I do have 2 additional and hopefully minor recommendations, which I'm happy to see on screen now if that's possible. The first, and apologies that they are quite long, but this is what happens when we do wordsmithing in the chamber. The first has to do with the draft adaptation and emergency management plan, and the second has to do with the draft roading and transport plan. Mr. Mayor, you're happy that I just speak through those now? Great. So the first is to try to clarify a point in the adaptation emergency management plan that simply sets that plan up to ensure that it is consistent with our existing intent, which is that over time we would see the citywide emissions continue to reduce. And it would also, I think, behoove us to clean up the some of the language in there as well. So now that it's hopefully stable on screen, I'll just read through it. It's that the draft adaptation emergency management plan be amended to remove the statement, quote, citywide emissions are governed by central government policy, particularly the emissions trading scheme, and council's ability to influence these emissions is limited without depressing the ETS price, leading to an increase in emissions in another sector. And I'd like to see added in the statement that while acknowledging the influence of factors beyond our control, council will strive to make decisions that enable and encourage citywide emissions to reduce over time. So the reason to remove that first bit is that the long-term plan's purpose is not to critique central government policy. It is to lay out our ambitions and plans as a city. And our ambitions and plan as a city should be to acknowledge that there are some external factors, but in fact, that we will continue to strive to make decisions that enable and encourage citywide emissions to reduce over time. So hopefully fairly straightforward and comfortable there. The second recommendation, noting that the Deputy Mayor has seconded that, thank you, and you may wish to repeat or not, is that the roading and transport plan be amended to remove the words consider how to from the ongoing actions regarding shared path connections with the city to Fielding and city to Ashurst. To my mind, consider how to is quite passive. It's 3 years of sitting and thinking, what might we ever do? I think we've had quite clear feedback from the community that as budget allows, as NZTA allows, as agreements with landowners allow, they would very much like to see those connections. And in fact, those 2 connections would bridge shared paths out into 2 neighboring districts that I think there might be some aspirations for having deeper conversations with, and it wouldn't hurt to be able to signal to those communities that actually we are interested in connectivity, we are interested in linking up with them in more ways than one. So I'd hope that folks would be willing to as well take that change to that plan at this stage so that officers have some clarity when they come back to us in September. Thank you.
All right. There is a number of other recommendations, a number from Councillor Naylor and Councillor Fitzgerald. So what we might do is we will speak to these amendments here and deal with those before we get into the other ones. Otherwise, I can see us being here for a little while. We're going to be here for a little while anyway. If you could withdraw yourself out of the queue if you're speaking to something else. So we'll just deal with A and then B and speak to those. Okay. Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you. Just quickly, I will not be supporting either of these amendments. Councillor Barrett's been drinking the climate change Kool-Aid, which is fine, but I have not. There are all sorts of references throughout this document and this thing to carbon emissions, and frankly, it's a bit of a scam that we keep making ourselves poorer trying to reduce carbon emissions when we are already one of the most efficient cities in the world. And if every city was like our city is, there would be no issue. So I will not be supporting this.
Deputy Mayor.
Tēnā koe, Your Worship. I'm obviously in support of both of these recommendations. I do believe that we do have a good track record in being a council that is cognizant of the pollution and things that harm our environment, our city and areas, but we still continue to be a council that consistently strives to be better and make improvements, particularly in the lives of people. When we're talking about the air that we all breathe, that our children breathe, our mokopuna, the fact that we want to lead in this way because we care about people. And I think that a large part of the long-term plan is about the vision and the story. It's about people. And I think that this makes things very clear. I don't think it's overcomplicated, but I do think it's very realistic as well. Thank you. Kia ora.
Councillor Johnson.
Just a brief rebuttal to Councillor Fitzgerald's statement. In actual fact, the money that we invest in the low carbon fund makes us a profit. We're not actually poorer as a result of it. For every dollar we invest in that fund, we get a saving of, I think, $1.13, yeah, on top. So, in fact, taking action to reduce emissions is making us richer, not poorer.
Okay, would you like a right of reply? Oh, sorry, Councillor Hafter, you came in at the last minute.
Sorry to come in late. I'm going to speak to the second one. I'm not going to speak to the first one. The second one's more about the vision of doing pathways to Fielding and Ashurst, and I know it's been a wish of the council for a long, long time. It's a hard one because they are money, and they're a lot of money, and we put priorities ahead of them. And so it is a tough one to support because we've got other priorities that we as a council have supported over the years. So it is tough for me to support this one because it is a lot of, and there are other barriers in the way, particularly to Ashurst. We've got a quarry in the way. So I think the second one is a real issue for us because getting through a quarry might be quite hard. So I don't know if I can support the second one, but I haven't decided on the first. Thank you.
Councillor Zabellin.
Thank you. Just rising to support both. I too drink the Kool-Aid of evidence and data and financial performance. So I'm very happy to back the first. And the second one, I support the change in wording because I'm keen that we keep it on the table. I feel that this wording puts it in the too hard basket, and there it will stay for a much longer time. And I do consistently hear from lots of different members of the community, when are you going to get moving on that? So I think keeping it on the table with stronger wording around trying to find a way through what are some quite significant obstacles is important. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Barrett, right reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to say that colleagues that have spoken in support, I think, summed the matter up quite well. Look forward to the vote.
Okay. Do we want to take them separately? Okay, we will take them separately. So if we take A first, we'll just let our admin get that in line. So we'll vote on A first, which is around citywide emissions. If you could vote, please. And that is passed. 10 votes for and 5 against. All right, we'll now go to B. And this one is around the pathways. And we'll vote, please. And that again is passed by 10 votes to 5. Colleagues, there's a number of others coming up, so to give the staff a little bit of time to put them on screen, let's have a break now, back in the chamber at 11, and that gives the staff enough time to get the other recommendations up. Thank you. Now into the second part of the recommendations there, and what I'd like to do is we have an online AGM which some of us need to go to at midday. So we will break at 5 to 12. Just trying to give you a heads up of what's going on. So 5 to 12, and a few of us need to go to this online meeting, and then we will come back at 1 o'clock for finishing off the meeting, if there is anything to finish off. But we'll see how we go. All right, so our next one here is number C, and this is around requirement to operate within a rates capped environment is included. Okay, sorry, that wasn't clear. Okay, we're moving to number 2, and that we just tidy up the substantive here around the council receiving the draft strategic plans for consideration and preparation for the LTP, including including the amendments of A and B above, which we voted on just previously. So I've moved that, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Does anybody want to speak specifically to that? Councillor Johnson.
Sorry, I was in the queue to speak to C. Are we including C in this now, or is C going to be a separate thing?
No, C will come separately.
Okay, no, I haven't got.
Does anybody else want to speak to 2? Okay, you do want to speak to 2?
Just my question relates to the other recommendations that I've put through to governance, that if those are supported, would that not include wouldn't that have an impact on the draft strategic plans?
My advice was no, but I'll just check with the CEO. That's correct. That's correct. Yep.
So that would sit outside of that?
It sits outside, yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay, we're just voting on 2, which is to receive the strategic plans. All right, I'll ask you to vote, please. And that has passed 13 votes for and 1 against. Okay. Okay, we're going to do number 1, and again, this is around receiving the city strategy for consideration and preparation for the 2027-37 LTP. That was moved by myself, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. I've already spoken to that. Does anybody else want to speak specifically to that? Councillor Isabella.
Thank you. I did just have some general comments on the city strategy in particular, which I wanted to just note here. One about having still some reservations about the indicators. I think we had a helpful discussion about their use in providing contextual backdrop, but I'm still not sold because it seems to me that they're capturing info that we have access to anyway, and that would be provided through various reports as and when they were needed. But I am interested in the proposed report which Stacey mentioned, which would wrap all of that up in one place, and if that could be timed with the resident survey, because there'd be quite a lot of overlap. I think that as a single kind of compository of all that data would actually be quite useful and make the most of it. Also specifically had some questions about using the roading network condition score as an indicator for the environment area. It seemed quite an awkward fit. I'd be very interested in seeing whether there were any other alternatives to that we could consider, and also had wanted to agree with Councillor Barrett's observations about a yes-no indicator for a stormwater strategy and whether that's really a long-term whether that's going to show us any long-term trends or whether it needs to have an implementation element added to it. I'd be very interested to see if there were other options that we could look at in September when we firmed those up. And I just also had a comment around the Rangitane o Manawatu partnership and the way that was articulated, because I do think it is a bit misleading to say that we've made decisions to have standalone committee and committee appointments without also making it clear that those aren't current arrangements or the long-term outlook. I think that if we're including that, we need to make that clear, or we could pivot and better emphasise the kawanata in more detail to show what the current iteration of that partnership is actually looking like. Excuse me. But I really did like how it's shaping up. I really appreciate the simplification of the structure, and I'm very appreciative of the improved line of sight to the activities and to the performance. So structurally, I think it's very well put together. I'm really happy where it's at this stage, just keeping in mind those couple of points. Thank you.
Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Chamber. Good morning. Lovely to see so many officers here today. I'd imagine it would have been pretty difficult to write this report when only 10 out of 16 councillors completed the levels of service review. I find that incredibly disappointing, and yeah, I'd say the ratepayer would find that disappointing too. We're not asked to do a lot, so I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Just want to rise briefly to thank the officers who've done a tremendous amount of work to date, but also to acknowledge the difficulty that we find ourselves in with needing to do a 10-year plan in an environment where there is such significant change proposed going forward. And I appreciate the feedback from you, Mr. Mayor, in regards to those questions that you've asked about whether we do have to continue with this process. And on that basis, I accept that we do have to continue with this process, but did really question the value of doing a plan for 10 years when perhaps by the stage we get to year 1 or 2, the environment may well look significantly different. So that's all for now. Thank you.
All right, colleagues, just a couple of things. I agree with perhaps we can adjust there's an opportunity to, with the actual Rangitane partnership text, can be perhaps adjusted to reflect more of the current environment, but I do think we still need to have it in there. I do say too, we have partnerships with others as well. I mean, Rangitane is right at the top of the list, but you know, we have a partnership, and we should have a partnership, and in all honesty, with central government or the Crown. We have other partnerships as well with other sectors that influence our city. And it was made, a good point was made around enabling good lives. There are several other commitments that we've made, and I just want to signal to the officers that, you know, welcoming communities is right up there. If you think about our city, why is it different to Napier? Why is it different to New Plymouth? Why is it different to Nelson? Why is it different to Tauranga? It's because of that welcoming communities, which I believe all of these, I think, could be factored into something that says our commitments and welcoming communities, safe city, aged friendly, acknowledging sport man or two in the room, the active communities. So they go hand in hand, in my opinion, with enabling good lives. So I'm not going to put anything up here to make people do things, but just signalling that probably needs to be in the thinking when it comes back to us in September. Enabling good lives is really important, and it's absolutely paramount for the disability sector, and they've advocated for that really well, but so have all the others. So I'd prefer to have everybody in there rather than picking one over the other. So that's just one comment. All the other comments, I get what we're trying to do here. As I said, it's a moment in time, it's an endorsement, it's receiving it, it's making sure it moves along the pathway. So I hope we get unanimous support. All vote, please. And that is passed, 14 votes for and 1 against. All right. We'll move through to some of the extra amendments here, which is number C. And this is from Councillor Naylor, seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald, that the potential requirement to operate within a rates-capped environment is included in the draft infrastructure strategy. Significant issues for consideration. Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As teased out during the question time, I did find it a little bit surprising that the whole rates-capped environment issue was not included in the significant issues list that's outlined in attachment 15. It does have included responding to changes from central government, and particularly largely the commentary I understood that as meaning around the amalgamation options, etc. My reason for really asking for this to be specifically mentioned in the significant issues is that historically I believe we have gotten a bit unravelled with our last 2 long-term plans in terms of the need to be realistic in terms of affordability. And I think it's important for us to have that front of mind at this point when we're setting the strategic direction, because what happens is we can get carried away with wish lists and try and include all the things that we think our community might like. But what we've had in the last LTPs, the outcome of that has been a capital program that has been unrealistic to deliver, unfundable, and we've had the audit reports, adverse audit reports as a result of those perhaps unrealistic aspirations. So I really do believe it would be good for us to acknowledge that at this point, and that I do think it's a significant issue, so I just would like it to be specifically mentioned in that list. So that is all that's asking. I recognise that officers have said that they are mindful of it and it's definitely in people's thinking, but I think it being in people's thinking and it being on paper as a significant issue is 2 different things. So just having that included I think would be beneficial.
Councillor Johnson.
Yes, it's interesting, isn't it, how with time people remember things differently. My remembering of the adverse audit reports were that they were down to the need for us to fund the wastewater treatment plant and the uncertainty that was around that. But I guess we all remember things differently. Anyway, speaking to this particular amendment, I won't be supporting it because there is no requirement to operate within a rates-capped environment currently. Government has talked about it, but there's a general election coming up in November. Whether or not they're returned, I think, is highly doubtful. On top of that, there are many other changes that could potentially occur in the next few years, some of which I asked questions about at the very start of the presentation. And the answer I was given was that we were working within the information that we have currently, and that when and if things change, those things would then be taken into consideration. So I find it very strange to pick out one particular thing that might change and highlight that in the draft infrastructure strategy and not any other of the multiple things that could potentially change over the next few years and not include those in the strategy. And I suspect it's an attempt to limit the amount of spending that's put forward in the long-term plan by those who oppose spending in principle. So I won't be supporting it, and I would ask you all not to support it either.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I probably couldn't have put it better than what Councillor Johnson already has. The officer's report to me covers very well the range of significant reforms and changes that we're facing as a sector. I don't see any advantage in highlighting one of those personally, although I do recognise that other members might see this as an opportunity to conflate their opinions on affordability with the government's proposed policy. I think that's a step too far for our long-term plan.
Colleagues, look, I understand what the mover and seconder is trying to do, and they value this as top of their list, but why haven't we got Head Start up here? Why haven't we got other government reforms up here? And but as the officer said, it has been very much top of mind for them. It is in the document under government reforms. My colleagues are right. It actually physically isn't legislation yet either. But it's interesting. We're already, as in my view, we're already operating a little bit in this envelope anyway, and I think our last annual plan proved that. So I just think this is going possibly a step too far. And if we were to list this, what would be the unforeseen consequences of that? So I don't think it's worth signalling in absolutely in print. We're already doing it, and it'll start to come through. And actually, it's probably going to be in print in our financial strategy. So maybe it will happen, Councillor, in a way, but not in this bigger strategy for the entire council. So I'll leave it at that. Councillor Spellin.
Thank you. Yeah, I agreed, and just reviewing the wording that is on this table, in the table, in the row that says responding to changes from central government, it captures that possibility. It says regulatory changes and associated compliance requirements are likely to further impact, etc. So to me, that covers this possibility. And it also says that in such a dynamic environment, council needs to be responsive and adaptable to those changes, which I think speaks to the how, but that this table isn't the place to explore the how. I think that comes later. So I think this is a step too late for the process that we are going through at the moment.
Right, a reply, Councillor?
Thank you. I appreciate colleagues' comments on this and agree that, yes, we could say that it is implied within those overall umbrellas. I base my reason for pursuing this not only, I acknowledge that, yes, of course, with a general election, all sorts of things might change, but I understand that we have been given the direction to be working towards this, and I agree with the Mayor that we have had that at the front of mind, particularly in our annual budget this year. But I also think it lines up with the community expectations, which have been well communicated to us, where historically our rates increases have been well beyond what they believe is reasonable or outside of what they feel capable of, and definitely disproportionate to what our community's own income increases have looked like. So yeah, there are multiple reasons for me pursuing this, and I think the unforeseen circumstances are high rates increases. And I think historically our financial strategy has not addressed affordability for our community. It has had the ability to simply add percentages in those policies at a whim, and so that has always been a big concern to me. So I still think it would be appropriate to acknowledge this, but vote as you will.
Okay, we will vote, please, on C. That has failed. 4 votes for and 11 against. All right, we'll go to the next one, please. Okay. Number 3 is that Council endorse this draft infrastructure strategy, significant issues for consideration, preparation of the 2027-37 long-term plan. I've moved that, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. I'm not going to speak any further to that. Are there any other speakers to that? There being none, we will vote, please. And that is passed 13 votes for and 2 against. Okay, do we have a seconder for number 4? I thought we did. Yeah. Okay, Councillor Mickelard, is it, or Councillor Fitzgerald? Okay. Councillor Fitzgerald. Okay, number 4 is that preparing the draft LTP, any new activities programs are not included in plans unless specific direction has been provided by elected members. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. As again, I teased out a little bit during the question time, there have been a few items in the paper which have been indicated that they will be included in the draft plans, where I don't believe that specific council direction has been given. The example was around the resource recovery program, and whilst I don't want to get hung up on that specific issue, that was an example where we did ask for costings and impact to help enable our decision making, but I don't think in any way we as a council had arrived on a decision about whether that should be included. We wanted that available to us to help inform our decision making. Historically, we have had new activities that have been included in the LTP by staff, which then we've debated at the table, and there have been some activities or some programs where we've debated whether they should actually come out, and those have failed for a lack of majority with an equal vote. So actually them remaining in has been there without a majority view of council. So from a process perspective, for new activities, I think it's a much healthier process for those not to be included by staff as the assumption, but rather identified and voted on by elected members. I think if any activity or program is strong enough, it should stack up and get a majority view to support it. And so for that reason, I think it's a fundamental better process in terms of getting that majority view for the underlying assumption be that it not be included unless that direction has been given by elected members. So that's the reason for this recommendation, which I'd urge you to support.
Councillor Johnson.
Just a question to the mover, if I may, Mr. Mayor. How are you proposing that new activities or programs be presented then, if they're not to be included in the plans?
I'm expecting that information would come to us when we have adequate information to be able to make an informed decision. Then we can make that decision about whether it's included in the LTP. Where there are programs that are still being explored or further information is still yet to come to us, the resource recovery is an example, because I think there were some flaws in the report, some inaccuracies, and there was a level of discomfort with the information that had been given to us. There was also a number of us were really wanting to tease out what the costings were and what the impact of that was before deciding on whether that should be included. I think from my perspective, even if we want to consult on something, there are ways that we can consult with including them in the plan and without including them in the plan. And we've seen other councils use those examples where they've consulted on things and they've been separate from being included in the plan. So it's really about, I think for me it's about making sure that that line of sight is clear and that we're giving clear information to officers about the direction that we give, whether it is actually to be included in the plan or whether it's information that we're seeking that we're yet to decide on whether we include it in the plan. I'm hoping that answers your question.
No, it doesn't answer my question at all. So how would you expect officers to present new activities or programs to us if they weren't in the plans?
So costings and items would be available for information once that costing had been worked up, and then there would be a decision-making process, whereas that information would be put in a report and we would say, yes, we'd like to include it in the plan, or no, we don't want to include it in the plan.
Isn't that what we do already?
No.
Well, I think we disagree then. I'll have a comment. I'm not going to support this because I think it demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding about how we develop a long-term plan. And officers did try and answer to questions to explain the iterative nature of the long-term plan. But basically, In terms of including new activities or programs, at this point, anything we're working with is a draft. And there may be new activities or programs included in the draft as a result of responding to elected members' feedback on levels of service, for example, or as a result of officers responding to changed circumstances. That doesn't mean to say that those things will be in the final version of the long-term plan, but there has to be some working document that we use as we go through this process so that we can see what direction we're heading in. If nothing new is included in the plans until we've got a whole budget set up for it, I think that just makes it a very disjointed process. So I just think that this comes down to a misunderstanding of how we develop a long-term plan. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we have at least 2 opportunities for debate where elected members can put anything in or out of the long-term plan. We have when we're asked to approve the draft for consultation, and then we have when it comes back to us after submissions and we're asked to confirm it. And I think that those are the times when we've had a chance to see the programme as a whole, when we've had a chance to weigh up the relative costs of anything new and the overall cost of the long-term plan at the draft stage, and then subsequently when it comes back to us and we've had a chance to assess community feedback. Those are the opportunities. And I think if we're trying to go through a long-term plan process where nothing new can be included until later in the day, that is going to make it a very disjointed and hard to understand process. So I think there's a misunderstanding on behalf of the mover and seconder that new programmes, if they're in at this stage, are in permanently. That's not the case at all.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Councillor Johnson summed up a number of the arguments around this quite well, but I'm just trying, as I think others have been, to play this forward in our heads. How does this actually work in March? How does this actually work in April, May, June, when we're actually down to the final end of the process? And from memory, officers are under huge pressure at that point, and we're under a bit ourselves. Why would we throw this kind of spanner in the works? It just makes no sense to me. All for the want of something that's obviously already a line call because it's going to fail 8-8 one way or another. If something should be out, I would suggest it might be worth finding majority for that as well.
Councillor Dennison, online, you wish to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm actually going to support the recommendations for us here. It's what Councillor Johnson's outlined is something that's happened in more recent years and more recent long-term plans. In the past, programs that were proposed for the long-term plan were always out and needed to have a majority to get them funded in a draft to be above the funding line. And so I actually think there's a real weakness in that, and what we've ended up with is starting to get our rates rising and our debt increasing because programs are in, and history has shown that any program wanting to be taken out of the program is much harder than trying to put something in. There's just a trend that seems to happen. So I'm very comfortable with supporting the recommendation number 4. That programs are out, and when we go through the workshop process and developing the draft, we actually weigh those suggested programs up against every other suggested program and work out the value proposition against everything else, because otherwise it's just done in isolation, and I think there's a real weakness in it, and as I mentioned, it has a risk of increasing the rates and increasing the debt without actually justifying the program against every other suggestion. So I'm supportive of the recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Colleagues, I'll just add my 5 cents worth. I think democratically we're already doing this, and I think it was summed up quite well by Councillor Barrett. When we come down to the nitty-gritty of the horse trading at that time, can you imagine how we're going to have all these orphans sitting out over here, and we've got a plan over here? It's going to be so disjointed. There's nothing joined up. So we've already nobody gets a free pass here. Democratically, you vote whether you're going to put this into consideration in a draft plan. You then vote again whether that's going to be accepted. So I find this in a way, you know how much I hate process. This is going to be the worst possible process that we have. And look, I appreciate comments from other councillors who've been here a lot longer than I have, and there was ways that was done perhaps in a much simpler time. But look, it's not going to work. There has to be a working document which you can refer to. We can't have orphans sitting off on the side. You still, democratically, you still get the chance to say yes or no. It's not as if something gets a free pass. So this will suit some of colleagues for the way they want to go through the plan. It won't suit others. So I agree there'll be differences of views, but I just don't think this is great in our process, people, so I won't be supporting it. Councillor Barr.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I do agree with your comments. And I get we all want a robust process and to streamline as much as possible. I think it's not super helpful to doing a back to the future on how we used to do things 10, 15, maybe more years ago. I think what's changed significantly over that time is how responsive we're trying to be to our community, how much we try to engage up front in our planning processes to hear community voice and community aspirations. And it's those suggestions and ideas for new activities and programs that are coming through in this very early draft stage. And I think that has been an excellent change over time, that we're front-end loading that community conversation so that we can gather good information about the costs and implications of those decisions to take into that later part of the process that you were mentioning, Mr Mayor. So I really don't accept that there's a lack of justification for these new activities or programs. The justification is that they're coming through our community voice, and then our responsibility is to assess that against the bigger picture. So I'm comfortable with our process as is, recognising that has changed over time to reflect our new direction.
Right, a reply, Councillor.
Thank you. First, I'd like to dispute the suggestion that what I've proposed is based on a misunderstanding of how we develop an LTP. The last 3 LTPs I've been significantly closely involved with, and I do have a good understanding of how we develop an LTP. In terms of the suggestion by the Mayor that we always have the chance to say yes or no, I don't agree with that comment. We do not always have the chance to say yes or no when we get given 3 to 4 or up to 500-page documents to read, sometimes within a small period of time. We have historically had examples where officers have included programs in those plans, and when asked why they've been included, they've said that that's been an outcome of the strategic direction that we have set. But there have been new activities and new programs that we haven't specifically identified or endorsed. I think there is definitely examples shown around the country of how other councils have identified programs that have not been included in the plan, and they've had the ability to identify them and consult on them. Examples such as, these are options of things we could do, blah, blah, blah. This is what it would cost if we included them. So you get that feedback from the community, and I'm suggesting that there's different ways that we could do this that might get closer to a result that is palatable by our community. So I agree with the comments that Councillor Dennison has made also. I think this would provide a cleaner, tidier and more robust process if fundamentally we adopted this view. It would also be easier for officers to understand whether that's something that's supported by elected members. Otherwise we do run the risk of programs being included in there that may not have been picked up in the timeframes that we have. We also lack meeting time frames sometimes to have the time to really take things out that may not need to be there because they're really minor or they're small. So I think this is fundamentally a better process, and I would encourage you to support it.
Okay, we will vote on number 4, please. and that has failed for a lack of majority. 7 votes for and 8 against. All right, we move through to number 5, and I'll just ask the mover, or if anybody else in the room, we take these actually all come together. Do we put them as a group, or do you want them individually?
I think there might be different views. They're not all exactly the same. Some are similar, but
They all come back to the C reporting back. So I'm okay if you want to do them separately. We'll just be here a bit longer. That's all. So we do them together. Or?
Let's see how the first couple go, and if it's
Okay,
clear
right.
that there's not support, I'm happy to. But I
Okay.
think probably it would make sense to do them separately.
Okay. Yeah, they're yours, so I'm fine with that. Okay, can we go to the first one then? And this is it. We'll do number 5. Oh, sorry, I'm just a bit mixed up here. What about the ones before that? Okay. All right, we're doing number 5, which is around the CE report back on city marketing options for a reduction in level of services as provided to elected members for consideration. There is a seconder, I gather? Yep, okay. So Councillor Naylor, second by Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you. So the levels of service, I appreciate that staff really did hear that feedback following the last LTP, that wasn't an area that we did well in the last LTP, and I appreciate the work that's been undertaken by officers to provide a process that we can inform that and have input into that. It is disappointing that that process hasn't been picked up by more than a third of our elected members. So on that basis, I struggle to be able to place much strength in the information that's provided in this chart from page 26 through to page 32, because it says feedback indicated preference for blah, blah, blah. And if there's 5 people that have indicated a preference, or 6 people, that's certainly not a majority. So I am really putting these things forward to test the room in a more robust way, so that we get feedback on whether there's an interest for a change in the level of service other than what's outlined here. Also, with the lack of seeing that information and that data, obviously staff have indicated that they can provide that in the future, but without seeing that to help inform this process, I struggle to really feel that I've got a good sense of what the majority of council feel about some of these levels of service. So all of these recommendations fall out from the options that have been outlined, and the feedback that we heard today from officers was that they did want specific feedback from us, so that if we did want to make that specific feedback, it needed to be voted on. So apologies that I haven't prepared this prior to that. I really wasn't clear what sort of feedback we would be providing today, whether it was more informal to the iterative process or whether we did actually want to have some voting. So I'm testing a few things. City marketing is outlined on page 27. It said feedback indicated preference for continuing the current level of service for city marketing. I have heard feedback from other elected members where they have expressed a view that they would be open to a lower level or a different level of service for this. So I'm asking for this, that the Chief Executive report back on options for a reduction in level of service, so that would inform whether or not we wanted a change to the level of service. The assumption here that there is no change based on the information in our papers. So this would give us additional information to consider.
Colleagues, I'm not going to support this. We do seem to be cherry picking here, and the mover has been very strong in past debates around putting things into the chamber to vote on. So taking a survey and basing your sort of argument or debate on a survey, I find, again, quite flippy-floppy. The city marketing team is 5 people. It's part of a wider group, which includes the eyesight and the print synergy team. This is operational. That's why we employ this person next to me. There is so much going on around reforms, everything else. This is potential wholesale changes. And really, what are we doing saying this? We should be picking or telling the CE that we reduce the level of people in the organisation and marketing. We have a great marketing team. I think they're doing a fantastic job. We regularly get feedback that it's in a positive manner about what we're doing. I think let the CE come back to us. When we look at waters coming out of the organisation, there'll be some natural changes that occur for us. I don't think we should be picking winners and losers, and this is my view on just about everything that's going to come up. So I strongly advise you not to go down this path. It's been tried before, failed, and I just hope that it fails again, because we are getting into some dangerous territory. Councillor Harper.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. 10 of us did complete that survey, and we should be just using the results of that survey, which said to leave it as it is, which is the level of service. So I will not be supporting this recommendation, and I strongly support everyone else to do the same thing. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, I won't be supporting this. And I did just want to refer to the survey, because as some of you will know, I'm not really a fan of surveys. I don't find them helpful. But nevertheless, the rest of the elected members thought that surveys would be a good idea. A survey was put out, and one would have to assume that those who have strong views about any particular question that was asked in the survey would have answered it. If some elected members chose not to engage with the survey, my assumption would be that they don't feel strongly that those things that were in the survey should be either increased or decreased. But having accepted that staff were needing to engage with us through means of a survey, then I think we should be, making assumptions based on the results of that survey. And I'd be very surprised if any of these, additional recommendations that are being put up passes, because ultimately those who wanted a reduction in level of service, I'm quite sure would have voted for it in the survey. And if 5 people didn't engage with the survey, presumably they don't feel strongly about city marketing. On the issue of city marketing and all the other issues that are going to come up, I'm not really clear what the rationale is for a reduction in level of service other than cost saving. If so, I would encourage the elected member, if there's some rationale by why we can reduce level of service that isn't just to save money, then I'd quite like to hear it. Because if it's just to try and save money, then I can't think that it's a valuable step to take.
Okay, right, a reply, Councillor.
Thank you. Just in response to some of the comments that were made, no, this is not cherry picking. These items that have been included in this chart were a part of the first process that staff engaged us with to identify the areas we would like a deep dive, and I think there were 6 areas that were identified, and that was a majority from the majority feedback. Yes, surveys do have their limitations, but particularly when there's no transparency of the outcomes of those surveys. So I'd be keen to pursue being able to see whether the preference that has been indicated is a strong preference or if it's simply 6 out of 10. So with the 6 people that didn't engage, I don't necessarily take the view that that assumes that they're not interested. I think some people do have a view even when they don't complete a survey. So in terms of the comments of the Mayor that there's 5 people in this area, blah, 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 I am not suggesting anything to do with the performance of staff in this organisation. In fact, I think they all do an incredibly good job, and I'm not suggesting that what should come back to us from the Chief Executive should be focused around staff. There are other outcomes that are not related to staff, the delivery of Palmy Proud. There's all sorts of things in there that are not just around the staff. So I don't think it's fair for elected members to make that assumption. And what this resolution is asking for is no decision today. It's basically asking for a Chief Executive to report back on options. Then we are well informed about whether we would pursue any of those options. In terms of Councillor Johnson's perhaps question around the rationale for levels of service to change or reduce, my logic in pursuing this is to try and accommodate new activity and service. So when inevitably in these processes there's really valid and valuable things that are proposed and suggested that we should include, My concern is that we keep adding on top of what we already do. If we never change any of what we already do, that outcome is an unaffordable rates for our community. So I think where there are valuable, I do want to create space where there are valuable activities that we would like to introduce, rather than simply adding that on top of all the business as usual. So that is the rationale for me being motivated to explore some of this a little bit more in depth.
Okay, we will vote on 5, please. And that has failed for a lack of majority, 3 votes for and 11 against. Okay, we go to number 6. Again, I'm gathering it has got a seconder. Yeah, if we can just put that up, please, Councillor Fitzgerald. Okay, again, Chief Executive reporting back on climate change, that options for a reduction in the level of services provided to elected members for consideration. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. If I just draw your attention to page 26 under the climate change feedback, it said feedback indicated equal preference for continuing the current level of service and decreasing the level of service. So I take from that perhaps that 5 elected members thought it should be the same, and that 5 elected members suggest a decreased level of service, and obviously the other 6 elected members that we haven't heard from. On that basis, I don't believe we have a strong mandate for either option, keeping levels the same or reduction. So I think more information and testing that in this room with more elected members present than 10 is useful based on the feedback that we've had. So that's why I've proposed this option.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. There's no other speakers. We will vote. And that's failed for a lack of majority, 6 votes for and 9 against. Okay, number 7, that the Chief Executive report back on climate change, that externally verifying council emissions inventory is no longer required, as outlined on page 27. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. As you'll see on page 27, officers have proposed an option that council could also opt to further reduce the corresponding budget by no longer externally verifying council's emissions inventory. My view on council officer advice is that it's robust and does have good basis, and I'm happy to take the advice of officers without always needing to externally verify that information. I mean, whilst it's a relatively small cost, there is a principle involved here that often I think we use consultants to verify things that council officers have produced. I do not recall a time where the external verification has been different to what officers' advice has been to us. So in my mind, it's an investment that doesn't warrant the additional money that it's costing. So on that basis, and on the basis that staff have proposed it as an option, they're wanting clear advice from us today as to whether we pursue options they've provided. I'm suggesting that it's no longer required as a matter of as an assumption. I hope I've made that clear.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question first, probably to officers, just to understand why we have been getting external verification.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, David Murphy, General Manager, Strategic Planning. So there's an incredible amount of variables that go into developing these inventories for the citywide emissions and the organisational emissions. You know, I think it's obviously an area of high public interest, and I think having the confidence that our numbers are accurate is the reason why we're beginning external verification. But it's it's the sort of work that benefits from a second opinion in terms of how those variables and data is being pulled together. So, and that's the reason why it has always been in there, the budget, but based on the survey, it's been put there as an option for council to consider.
Great, thank you. How does the $15,000 here compare to the cost of the audit of the annual plan and annual report?
Can somebody tell us what the audit cost for the organisation is compared to the $15,000 of this one?
Through Mr Mayor, off the top of my head, I think it's in the magnitude of the 400,000 to 500,000 mark. I just also, in addition to this particular item, the auditors rely on this independent review to help validate the service performance measure that relates to it in the annual report.
Thanks. So to follow up on that, if we were to, for some reason, choose to remove $15,000 here, we might actually see it added back through the external audit, needing to get more information and verification.
It could result in potential, if you remove this, we would have to look at the service performance measure in the long-term plan, whether we can measure it to a standard that would be acceptable for auditing. And if it stayed in and there wasn't the independent verification of it, we may have issues in obtaining a clean audit opinion on service performance measures.
Thank you. Brief comment, if I might. Won't be supporting this, perhaps no surprise to colleagues, for several reasons. One is I do think that community deserves confidence across the range of council activities and investments. It sounds like there's a potential loop whereby trying to fiddle with something that's actually working quite well in terms of a verification process would simply create uncertainty and costs elsewhere. There is extraordinary public interest around climate change emissions from all parts of the community, including those that for some reason haven't been able to internalize the reality that anthropogenic climate change is a significant and existential threat to the planet and life on it. I would like to think, for those that are particularly concerned about the $15,000, that they could be given confidence by our investment of $3 million into emissions reductions that have yielded $4 million of savings. And within that $1 million that we have created through investing in climate action over a decade, we could find $15,000 out of that $1 million that we've saved to continue to verify and provide this community with assurance that we are doing them right in terms of our response to climate change in 2026 and beyond. So I'd ask you to vote against this particular recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, do you need a right to reply? Okay, we're going to vote please on number 7. And that has failed for lack of majority, 3 votes for and 12 against. Okay, see if we can get one more in. We can go to the next one. The Chief Executive report back on safer community initiatives. The consideration for the budget for a safe city host is considered as part of the SPG process. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. I think once again in this report, officers have provided a couple of options for us. One being that this funding could be included in budgets. Sorry, I'm paraphrasing this. But the other option is that it could continue to have a contestable process and considered through the strategic priority grants funding. My view is that there are, I think, keeping visibility on programs like this and having a contestable process is healthy. I think there is also other options for this program to be continued if it wasn't successful through that contestable process. And the example of that is that actually could also be funded through the funding that BID get for specifically the area in the CBD. So my view is in line with the bottom part of that, those options that have been outlined by staff on page 30, that we could choose to continue to have the program considered within the strategic priority grants funding, and that's what I'm proposing as opposed to the other change that's outlined earlier in that commentary.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm actually quite sympathetic to this request. However, the report says, and I think we all know, that the Safer Community Initiative is not a good fit for contestable funding. So there might be a conversation about if we fund that in future, and I'd be certainly open to that, but this recommendation doesn't get there for me, so I can't support it, I'm afraid.
Councillor Johnson.
It's my understanding that the budget for the Safe City House used to be separate to the strategic priority grant process. It used to be a separate budget line, and that during some budget, I guess, wheeling and dealing, we might call it, at some point that it was then included as part of the SPG process. So there's history to this particular initiative. It's a valuable initiative, and it's recently gone through a whole evaluation, as I think some of you will remember me asking questions about previously. If the evaluation is saying that it's not suitable for a contestable process, then I think we should take that on board. The problem with including it as part of the SPG process is that it then reduces the effective SPG fund by, I think it's 60,000 off the top of my head. And so it's, to my mind, this is about saving money rather than considering how the best means of funding this Safer Community Initiative is provided. So I wouldn't be keen for it to be considered as part of the SPG process because it goes against the advice that we've received.
Councillor Harper.
I agree entirely with Councillor Johnson. I think it shouldn't sit in the SPG process because that fund is just totally stretched as it is. So I just think it should sit where it is at the moment and not with the SPG process. Thank you.
All right, you need a right of reply? You do, okay.
Yeah, good perspectives to hear from other colleagues. I mean, I think what I'm looking for here is that we don't lose visibility and line of sight to programs, and sometimes this is that happens when we change the nature of the way programs are funded. And what this is suggesting is that the plan has included an action to continue to fund the program separated from the strategic priority grants, and the draft budgets would be prepared accordingly. So what this is suggesting, if we don't do anything different, then that just it appears to me gets absorbed into the overall budgets. I don't like that we've lost sight of a number of projects over the years through those sort of methodology, and I think something like this does still need to be kept separate, whether it's through the strategic priority grants or not. I'm either here nor there. Those who have suggested otherwise haven't suggested a different option, but I'm just highlighting perhaps a discomfort with it getting absorbed into business as usual without us having that line of sight. So that's the reason why I've raised this for consideration.
All right, colleagues, we're going to vote. Oh, sorry. That's failed with the lack of majority, 2 for and 13 against. Colleagues, we'll adjourn the meeting. We've got to be somewhere else now. We'll come back at 1. Just got to buy some time for the Zoom meeting. So legally, I think 1:15 I'm allowed to go to. So 1:15, you've got 15 minutes extra. 1:15 back in the chamber.